Hello and welcome back to our Getting Started videos series. This series is meant to help you get started on your recovery journey. Today, we're going to be talking about step 6. So let me read step 6 with you right now. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. One of the things that happens when we work step 4 and step 5 is we usually start to discover certain themes. We can call these themes positive or negative depending on how they affected us. Maybe certain positive characteristics showed up, but also a lot of times we notice certain negative characteristics that showed up that played a role, whether that was dishonesty, whether that was pride, whether that was fear. Lots of different things can show up as themes throughout our life that have impacted us and caused us to behave in different ways that we now identify as dysfunctional. So in this step, what we are doing is we're getting ready. And what that means is now we've identified these things and what are we going to do with them? We're ready at this point to have God come in and remove them. An important part of this step is that you don't do it alone and you don't do it in your own power. So this takes us back to the foundation of steps 1, 2, and 3 and recognizing we need God's help. So that's true of all of the steps, but specifically in this step, we need God's help to help us remove these defects of character. So much of the work is actually God's, but we have to be willing participants in that work. That means we have to be willing. Willingness is powerful because not a whole lot can be done if you're not willing to partner with God to do it. So if you continue to operate in your own power, if you try to address your character defects in your own power, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel, it's going to actually make you feel pretty bad. And that's an indicator to you that you might be trying to work this step in your own power. When you work this step with God, it's actually freeing. Now that doesn't mean it's easy, but it is freeing. And why is that? Because you're letting go of things that have actually been holding you back and weighing you down. So anytime you let go of some of that added weight, it actually starts to free you up from some of the burdens and things that have actually been causing you to feel more and more unmanageable. So let's just look at one, dishonesty. Dishonesty can get us out of things. Dishonesty can help us get around things or avoid uncomfortable situations. Dishonesty can help us to avoid accountability. Dishonesty can be useful, but it isn't what's best. And that's one of the realizations that we come to is these character defects, they were useful to us. We learned them because they were useful and oftentimes part of how we survived, but they aren't what's best. And a big part of our journey is taking responsibility for these things and changing the way that we live, living in alignment with God's will and God's ways instead of continuing to try to do this life in our will and our ways and our own power. So what do we want to replace these character defects with? We want to replace them with the good characteristics that God created us for. So in the place of dishonesty, we would start practicing honesty. We would start actively trying to be more honest with God and honest with ourselves, and therefore honest with the people around us. We would notice when we're tempted to be dishonest, and we would call that out for what it is, a defective character that we tend to gravitate to when we're trying to live life in our power instead of in God's. We would surrender that temptation to God and ask Him to help us to have the courage to be honest in this situation that we're being tempted to be dishonest in. But we need God's help, and that's key in this step. So as you look at step 6, as you start to identify the different character defects that have shown up through your inventory and your 5th step, one thing is so important. As followers of Jesus, we've entered into a relationship with God through Jesus, which means that 2 things have happened. One, God has ultimately made us right with Himself, taking on all of the just punishment for our sin and our rebellion and placing that on Jesus on our behalf, a substitute. Because of that, He is now willing and able and generously forgiving our sins and restoring us to a position of right standing before him. But there's another thing that happens, and that is he also makes us new, which means that when we enter into this relationship with Jesus, we're letting go of the old and we're embracing the new, which is a new desire to follow God and to live according to his will and his ways. And this new nature that he births in us through his Spirit, that new nature loves to obey and follow God. And so when we look at our character defects, these are characteristics of who we were when we were operating in our own power apart from God. We still have to contend with them, but they are no longer who we are. We don't identify with them because we've been made new in Jesus. So, yeah, we have to deal with them. Yeah, they're a part of what we have to navigate every day, but we can overcome them by walking in our new identity in Jesus. So as you dig into this step, remember what you're looking at, these characteristics, they're part of your old life and your old nature. They may still bother you today, tempt you today, show up in your life today, but they're no longer who you are. And that distinction is what gives you the courage to continue to seek them out and to overcome them with God's help every single day.